The Existential Psychotherapy book is one of the best books I've ever read. I've read this book twice, and each time it felt like I was taking an educative course on how to live life better or on how to cope with living on this planet. The author of this book is Dr. Irvin D. Yalom, who's an American psychiatrist. Dr. Yalom believes that the root of anxiety is one of the 4 ultimate concerns. What are the 4 ultimate concerns? Or the better question I think would be, what is an ultimate concern? Based on Yalom's idea, we human beings are deeply anxious about 4 things. Because we live here, because we exist, we are doomed to be anxious about these 4 things instinctually. What are these 4 things? Death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. When we are reminded that our time is limited on this planet, we become anxious. And the second one, the freedom part, when we are reminded that I'm free here and I'm responsible here, that responsibility is exciting, that freedom is exciting, but also it's scary. And the other one is isolation. We are lonely on this planet. We can be beside other people, we can support each other, we can give each other love, but overall, we are born alone and we're gonna die alone. It deeply makes us anxious. The other one is meaninglessness. We are born here without any meaning being set for us, without any purpose being set for us to do. But then, after we exist, after we are born, now it's our turn to look for our meaning. After you exist, and because you exist, now it is your responsibility to take action and aim towards your meaning in life. The book has 4 parts, each part for a specific ultimate concern. The first part is about death, and I will talk about death in this first video. The second one will be about freedom, and then isolation, and then meaninglessness. So now the death part. So existential therapy suggests that there's an ultimate concern that causes anxiety, and then this anxiety causes defense mechanisms. For example, death is an ultimate concern that causes anxiety, and this death anxiety can lead us through some defense mechanisms that are unhealthy and cause psychological problems. That's why Otto Rank, a psychologist, has said, the therapist has far more leverage if she or he views the individual primarily as a fearful, suffering being rather than an instinctually driven one. How can death lead us to some unhealthy behaviors? And how can we use death to have a more fulfilling life? Is it possible to overcome the fear of death ultimately? Is it healthy to have the death anxiety to some extent? And if yes, because the answer is actually yes, why should we have that death anxiety to some extent? So the author states that life and death are interdependent. We may assume that death occurs after life, but the truth is life and death exist simultaneously. Death impacts the shape of our lives and the quality of our existence. When we are reminded that someday we are definitely gonna die, we feel anxious. But this anxiety opens our eyes and gives us better perspective to look at life. Let's say you're very angry because of your coworker's behavior at work. She or he is a toxic person most of the times and tries to bully the people around. So you ruminate about the situation. You may even think about other negative behaviors of other people. And you may be like, well, the world is full of toxic people. You feel miserable. Then let's assume that you are coming back from work, you're crossing the street, and a car is moving towards you too fast, and you think that you are gonna be absolutely hit by the car. But then somehow the car doesn't hit you and you survive. In those moments that you were sure that you're gonna be hit by the car or you're gonna be dead, you kind of had a death experience. It was a death experience in a short time, but in a really deep level. You are reminded that your time is limited on this planet and you're not going to be here forever. In those short moments, you may have thought of beautiful things that had happened in your life and the things that you're going to miss if you die. So after you are reminded of death, you're kind of reminded of life. You're kind of reminded of the value of life. And hopefully and possibly you're not that angry at your coworker anymore.
I had an actual near-death experience. I do have a newfound respect for life.
You know, it's like Ross Geller's similar death experience.
It was a car backfire.
In my defense, it was the best thing I could find about this thing. And also many people who stay alive after a suicide attempt realize that they have taken life for granted, and that realization is because of facing death. So this is how death impacts life and how death and life exist simultaneously in our living journey. One of Yalom's patients had fatal cancer, and that made him be reminded of death and look in the eyes of death. And that led him into looking in the eyes of life and acknowledge that he has taken life for granted. I have had a similar experience like that too. It was like 2 years ago. I was feeling depressed for at least 2 or 3 weeks. I was jealous of other people because I thought they were having it more. They were living better. Then someday something happened to my body. I faced a major health problem. I couldn't walk easily. And you know, at the time, I vividly remember one day I was in a car. I was looking at the people walking down the street. I was looking at them through the window of the car. And I would look at their feet and I would think, look how beautifully they're walking. And I remember that when I would look at them, I would also think, do they know how precious this ability to walk is? And overall, it was like, I was not dead technically, but I was absolutely out of life. It was like there was this pause in my life, and it was like I have zoomed out and I was looking at life in that far, far perspective. And I wasn't feeling like I was living. I was reminded of death. I was close to death mentally, more than I was close to life. I was reminded of death, and that reminded me how fragile, limited, and also precious life is. Now I'm fine. I can run again, I can walk again, and I'm thankful for that. Now, I don't know how to say it so that it doesn't look cliche, but now after all those days, I have a new appreciation for life. I'm still more grateful for life than before. I am more grateful for the safety that I have here, this desk, my books, my family, my friends, my ability to walk, my ability to see, to talk, to touch, to love, to be, to exist. And it's all because I was reminded of death. As Yalom says, by keeping death in mind, one passes into a state of gratitude, of appreciation for the countless givens of existence. Now the question is, what are the defense mechanisms when we face death anxiety? There are 2 of them. Either we believe deeply in our specialness and inviolability, that is called personal specialness, or we rely on the existence of an ultimate rescuer. Let's talk about the first one. Personal specialness. So in theory, we know that we are not that different from other people. All the good and bad can happen to us like other human beings. But when it actually comes to death, we think we are different from other people. When we are reminded of the fact that many adults, when they get older, they get diabetes, they will have high blood pressure, and their vision will decrease. But we don't think that this is gonna happen to us. We're like, well, this is not gonna happen to me. I'm not gonna get diabetes. I'm not gonna have high blood pressure. My eyes are gonna be okay, just the way they are now in my 20s. This is not gonna happen to me. And when it happens to us, we are gonna deny it.
Why, God, why? We had a deal. Let the others grow old, not me.
So deep down, if we are honest, we may find that feeling of being special and different from others and being an exception. I'm not gonna be like others. And if we really dig deep down, we may find that thought out there that is like, I'm not gonna be dead. I'm not mortal. It is the personal specialness. I'm different, I'm an exception, and I'm special. What is gonna happen to others is not gonna happen to me. Now the next defense mechanism, the ultimate rescuer. In this one, we put faith on someone else that can save us from the anxiety of death or even death itself. This one has a root of dependency. So what happens when we are dependent on something else when facing life and death? We are going to lose our freedom. At this point, you don't give yourself the opportunities that you could have if you hadn't chosen an ultimate rescuer. So because you attached yourself to something else or someone else, you cannot move forward. You are gonna lose opportunities of development, growth, and fulfilling your potentials. And also the potential to find meaning that I will talk about in the fourth video, meaninglessness. And also Otto Rank, a psychologist that I talked about in the very first part of the video, believes that we have two primal fear of life and fear of death. Fear of life is the fear of having to face life as an isolated being. It's the fear of individuation, of moving forward, of standing out of nature. Fear of death is the fear of loss of individuality, fear of being dissolved again into the whole. Rank believed that between these two fear possibilities, these poles of fear, the individual is thrown back and forth all his life. So yeah, there's this feeling of not moving forward and not doing anything, and that's the fear of death. And there's this fear of life thing, which is the fear of moving forward. So we are afraid of moving forward and we are afraid of not moving forward. You know, starting this YouTube channel was like that to me. I was very anxious when I started this channel. I have like 2 videos, but I haven't published them yet. I haven't made the channel yet. I'm very afraid. It's just me doing this thing alone. I'm afraid of the judgment and the outcome. And I really have the desire to have other people support me, and the longing that I have for an ultimate rescuer here is obvious to myself. And also, what if I fail? If I fail, then it is proven that I'm not an exception, that I'm not special. Do you remember the defense mechanism, personal specialness? That's gonna be destroyed if I fail. So what do I do to defend that defense mechanism? What do I do to defend the fact that I'm special?
I'm gonna procrastinate, and I'm not gonna make videos.
But I don't want to do that, hypothetically. So when I want to do something that has the possibility of failure, I put the personal specialness belief in danger. Because when I fail, then it is proven that I'm not an exception and I'm like other human beings who fail every now and then and who are mortal and limited and are not perfect and exception. But if I don't make the videos, I'm afraid that I'm not doing anything, and it feels like death. When you don't move toward anything in your life and you're not growing in any way, well, that's death. We are humans. It's not like we can just sit and not do anything at all. So I have that fear, and I have this fear. I have fear of death, I have fear of life, I have fear of failure and moving forward, and I have fear of not doing anything and not moving forward. And I think the best thing I can do is to have a balance. And although I feel like a child in an isolated desert, I can have the support of other people, but not put faith in any ultimate rescuer, and be on my own feet and do my thing and see what happens. When we fear death, by not using life, we may try to run away from death, because if you're not using it, if you haven't lived, then death doesn't have much meaning, does it? But the problem is, if you're not using life, you are gonna feel guilty. And this is called existential guilt. Existential guilt is a feeling that you have when you are not using life, when you're not doing anything in your life, and when you think about the things that you could have done but didn't. The feeling of existential guilt is because of the unused life and unlived life within us. Existential guilt is more related to responsibility, and as I told you in the beginning of the video, responsibility is more about the freedom concern. The second ultimate concern was freedom, and it's related to responsibility, and responsibility is related to unlived life, and so the existential guilt. So I will talk about the existential guilt in more details in the the next video. Overall, to some extent, the anxiety of death can help us have a more fulfilling life. As Yalom says, anxiety is guide as well as enemy, and can point the way to authentic existence.